Hi guys, welcome to a Full Circle Magic Live Q&A. Today we've got with us Andrew Mayne, and we also got Alex Borton co-hosting. Do you guys want to say hi?
Hello, everybody. I'm Andrew.
Hi guys, I'm Alex.
You can tell Alex because he's the really hyper one.
Yeah, that's me. I do that. Alright.
He has to stand for this. That's awesome.
Okay, before we sort of get really started, Andrew, could you just tell us a little bit about how you got into magic?
So, when I was a little boy, my grandfather used to do coin tricks. He could take a coin, take a quarter, put it on the table, spin it, and I'd watch the coin spin around, and he'd snap his fingers, and it would vanish. I was totally impressed by this. I was just blown away by how he was able to do this. To this day, I still don't know how he did it. And for a really cool twist, I would say, check your boot. I'd take off my boot. I'd look inside the boot. There would be the quarter.
When I was a little boy,
Sorry, I'm having some trouble hearing you.
Yeah.
It seemed to be Alex's sound. I just turned his microphone off, so yeah. So sorry, could you just say it again?
Okay, so on my screen, all I saw is him like going around and managing dials and stuff, like he's trying to prevent like a nuclear meltdown. So, when I was a little boy, my grandfather could do some really cool sleight of hand. He'd take a quarter, he'd set it on a table, spin it, and it would spin around, and he'd snap his fingers, and the quarter would vanish. He'd be like, "Where is it?" He'd say, "Look in your boot." I'd take off my boot, and the quarter would fall out. So we could do cool things like that. So I was transfixed. I'm like, this is awesome. I want to be able to do this. So I started, with an interest there. My father encouraged it. My father would bring me home like magic kits and stuff, and help me learn magic. And it just stayed with me. It's the same story. I think everybody here went through at some point.
Yeah, I think we all get into it in a rather similar way, but sometimes all the time, I think it evolves differently.
Yeah, some people grow out of it and become responsible people, and the rest of us end up here talking to each other about magic on the internet.
That sounds about right, doesn't it, really?
Yeah.
Now, obviously, you've recently published a book as well. You're not just a magician; you're a publisher, well, a published author as well.
I've written several novels, but this is the first one out from HarperCollins. It's called Angel Killer, and the sequel comes out in July, but this just came out a few months ago. It was originally an independently published book. I released it myself, and I was the 5th best-selling independent author in the United Kingdom in 2012 on this book. HarperCollins picked up the series, and then we did a substantially larger version of it, expanded, revised, etc. And very excited to have this out now. So Angel Killer is about an FBI agent, but what's interesting about her is she comes from a family of magicians. So if you're into magic, there's a lot of little magic insider stuff there, and she's after a serial killer who makes his crimes look like they're supernatural. The first case she comes across is a body that is emerged out of the ground in a cemetery of a girl that died over a year before, but she looks completely fresh, as if she just had recently died and apparently crawled out of her own grave. And it gets weirder from there.
Yeah, I've actually heard a lot of good things about that. It came quite highly recommended from Brian Brushwood.
Yeah. Well, Brian's a buddy, so he's biased. But yeah, it's been very, very nicely reviewed. I had some great write-ups in Genie, Linking Ring, and was very, very flattered by the reception to it. So. That was quite nice. I wasn't sure how it would be received by the magic community because I wanted to get into magic methods. I didn't want to reveal, like, this is how a sign and half trick works, but I wanted to talk about how the magician's mind works, which I think is far more interesting and allows you to appreciate and enjoy magic more than just some sort of exposure. So that's a big part of the storyline of the book, of the series, is how she thinks like a magician. She understands magic principles, but then seeing how they play out in the rest of the world. It's not like it's Murder at the Magic Castle. It's somebody using methods similar to how a magician would use to create what looks like supernatural occurrences.
So do you think you managed to get the line right? Do you think that you haven't gone into exposure, but you've gone into, like, do you think you crossed that line or not?
I don't. I mean, for me, the line is very, very clear. You know, exposure is, you know, the intent to gain some sort of novelty or amusement or information purely from revealing a method, whereas instruction or using it some sort of informational point of view is very, very different. And you know, you're not going to read this and understand, you know, the specifics of any type of magic trick. You will see how a magic mind kind of works, which is fine, but I don't, you know, to me, telling people how certain real tricks work is uninteresting. Now, I've invented tricks in there. You know, like, she'll recall something from her grandfather's show that'll sound a lot like something, but it'll be a very different method that suits the narrative.
Totally. So obviously, you just mentioned exposure. Obviously, there is a lot of internet exposure going on at the moment. What do you think of that? Obviously, a lot of magicians are quite afraid that it's damaging and harmful, but also I just kind of feel like the people that are watching that are us being angry at the fact it exists.
I think magicians should worry more about their audiences being bored than knowing how a trick works. Ideally, you know, our magic, you know, our method should be, you know, invisible. People should not know how they work or whatever, but it is amusing to see who gets most upset about exposure, and I think that often they're not worrying about the right thing. And I'm not a proponent of exposure in most situations. I'm against it, but as a skeptic and as somebody who's been involved in trying to explain how people lie to others and cheat and commit fraud using magic means, I've been involved in exposing, you know, the methods of would-be psychics and stuff, and that's a case where I think that it's you know, useful. And there are cases where sometimes it can be harmful, but I think that the more people cry about it or complain about it, you know, the more they ignore the real issues. And you know, I think it's ultimately probably not helpful, but so is worrying about something you have no control over.
So it's more, to you, it's more about the intent than the information itself.
Yeah, I mean, it's some people are upset about access to information, and they think that any easy access is exposure, and that's not my opinion. You know, if you know you have magic in books and libraries, you have magic on YouTube, you have tutorials wherever they are. If it's teaching, if something has to be invested in the person learning, spending time to do it, that's not exposure.
Yeah, well, it's just because I actually recently did a live stream with Brian. We actually talked about a similar thing, obviously, because of Scam School. And that's pretty much exactly what he said. You know, are you making a conscious decision to look for it or not?
And you know, the percentage of our audience is, most people have never seen close-up magic. Most people in this world have never seen close-up magic done right in front of them live. How do we get out there and entertain them? You know, worrying about whether or not 1 out of 100 people know how a trick works, or somebody's going to go bother to go look it up online is just pointless to me.
And yeah, like you said, not many people are going to bother, and even the ones that are they even necessarily going to know what to look for?
Yeah. I think it's putting the wrong focus. I think the problem is that many magicians forget that magic is a performing art. And if you take away the performance aspect, then what you're left with is, it's just a bunch of secrets. And secrets are important, but the performing is critical.
So what do you think makes good magic? What is the difference between a trick and magic to you?
I think, you know, it depends upon interest. Why are we interested in it? A trick can be interesting if it's just a trick. If somebody says, have you seen this trick, and all you see is hands holding cards, then I know it's the move that's interesting. If somebody says, have you seen this magician, and I see a person who's very funny or serious or whatever and dramatic and has a really cool presentation for it, then it can be, you know, that's a different kind of way to be entertained. And one is no more valid than the other. You know, flourishing is a very, very big thing. Flourishing's not my thing, and watching cardistry stuff, I have a limited patience for it, but I understand why people love this, and I would never want to take that away from them. And I think it's just as valid as the things that I like.
A lot of people think that cardistry can actually take away from it and make it feel a lot more like a trick. as opposed to magic. What do you reckon about that?
You know, on a whole or for a performer, you know, there's the long debate over whether or not you should use a lot of flourishes or not when you perform, and I think it depends upon your particular style. If you use a lot of flourishes and fancy card moves, then the kind of card magic you do has to be that much more impossible. If they know that you can pull cards from thin air, you know, doing an ace production or assembly isn't as impressive. You need to step that up, or create tension, or create these circumstances in which it seems like it's totally impossible. But I enjoy, I do, like my own sort of shows. I've done, card fan productions, things like that, on a very, very limited basis, and then gone on to do card magic. But it's very important to then make it apparent why it's still difficult, or the circumstances make this very, very impossible.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that, because we were just talking about, what makes good magic. Do you think that enough magicians are actually even understanding that, or do you think to too many people it is just about fooling somebody?
It's a good question. I don't have enough overview of everything that goes on in magic to know what that is. I would certainly say that if you look at where a lot of the discussion is online or in magazines, I think that there could be more emphasis on performing, way more emphasis on performing, and I think that that's the problem. Is that this is a discussion I have quite a lot. Is that there are people who are interested in magic for technical reasons, and there are people who are interested in it for performing, and we all like to use terms like art and drama and throw them around, but I don't think it means the same thing coming from some people as others. If I go watch a dozen magic shows, the number of times that I will walk away thinking that somebody is a really clever writer or spent a lot of time scripting it, it's not going to happen. Maybe happens, 1 out of 50 shows I see. And so that clearly shows me that could be an area where people could, pay more attention to. And, something that can certainly be said about my own shows, too, that I've done in the past. The attention, not enough attention was put into it as performing art.
Would you say that's because a lot of magicians are self-taught, and it's also very much staying within that community? Would you say it's partly because magicians don't really socialize with actors, actors don't really socialize with magicians?
I would say that's a big part of it. And if you're a stand-up comedian and you're working hard, you're going to be going on stage a lot. Like, I have a friend, she's a comedian in LA. Every night she can go on stage, she's on stage, and she's in front of audiences, and she's in front of other comedians, and it's a highly competitive environment. If you're ripping off material, or if you're using somebody else's jokes, they're going to come back to you very, very quickly, partially because the people who employ comedians have an invested interest in making sure that they're not hiring hacks. And it's not the same case in magic. You can do a standard magic act and work around the world because magic is much rarer, and so it's not the same sort of competitive environment. Versus being a comedian or an actor where, a comedian who's an active working comedian is going to know tons of working comedians in their own city or elsewhere, or people who are constantly competing against each other. The same with acting. And with magicians, the problem is that we tend not to understand drama or theater, and then maybe we get kind of a community theater level understanding of it, and we then tend to think that we have a much bigger understanding than we do. And that's sort of the problem too, is that people understand, oh, well, there is a thing called scripting, there is a thing called dramatic tension, etc., but they still don't have a very advanced understanding of that. Mm-hmm. And the people who do fabulous by Darren Brown, Penn and Teller. These people could walk into a theater class and teach theater students about theater.
Do you think that possibly the resurgence of mentalism right now is kind of highlighting the idea that performance matters? It's almost just as much as the magic, because if you take magic out of a magic act, it's just a theater act. So when you think about it, like within that terms, and now that people are thinking, okay, well, I'm just going to go to a show with a suitcase, and that's how I'm going to perform the show, as opposed to these large props, that maybe that showmanship is being highlighted now.
I don't know. I haven't seen. There's certainly mentalism is certainly more popular now, and part of that has to do kind of with economics. You take like cruise lines. Cruise lines don't want to have to ship around magic props and illusion acts anymore, and so they'll hire minimalism acts. But when you look at your average working minimalism act, how different is it from any others? And there's not a lot of originality. It's I joke there's there's a theater in the Magic Castle where it seems like the deal to perform in that room is you have to do the same book test everybody else does. Granted, it's a great book test, but it's like, man, it's the law. You have to do that one inside of there. And I think that mentalism has certainly shown people who were into close-up magic that there's an opportunity and a place to perform this on a larger stage. I don't know, aside from, let's say, Darren Brown, how much I've seen that I go, wow, there's a lot of people pushing it. And there are, and I don't mean to say that there aren't, I'm just saying what I've seen.
Right. So, in that case, right now, a lot of people, like you said, for example, I'm from close-up, and when I was introduced to mentalism, I already had a bit of a study within psychology, general social psychology, and whatnot, just as a general passion. I found that it really lent to the mentalism side. It was nice that because I come from the busking world, I could just pack in mentalism routines. But again, it separates the prop from the performance. That proplessness allows you to focus more on the interaction between yourself and the audience, which is, I think, what you were touching on earlier about actually having to be an actor, really be able to connect with your audience.
I think that you could tell which direction somebody came from, if they came from stage or they came from close-up, by the choice. If they're a stage magician, they're going to be using a dream vision and a box chest to do mentalism. If they're a close-up person, they're probably going to be using billets and things where they feel comfortable doing that. And Alex, I have a quick question. Are you using a lapel mic? Because it sounds like you're using your onboard on your computer, like it might not be switched over to that.
I'm trying to have it set up. Is it still echoing?
You're very echoey. It sounds like it's the inboard microphone. No big deal. Just wondering.
Yeah, I tried to set that up before I came back on. I actually had to shut the entire rig down because it froze up during the game, so
I didn't mean to sidetrack.
Fair enough.
I think the biggest thing that matters, and it's hard, is character. In Magic, we're not exposed to that many variety of characters. As a kid, my two strongest influences were Penn and Teller and David Copperfield, and that was what happens when you stayed within Magic. Is you say, oh wow, I'm either going to be this or I'm going to be this, and you have to step outside and start looking around at other things. And that was, thankfully, discovering comedy and starting to look at that and starting to understand how these things play out differently was very, very helpful for me in understanding. Okay, I can sort of find my own way, and I think that if you look at like who we consider the giants, David Copperfield, Penn and Teller. We'll go back to, say, Doug Henning, Siegfried and Roy. All of those people came out in sort of the same period where they weren't really influenced by each other. Magic was sort of in this period where there wasn't a lot going on television or theatrically with it, and so they had to find their own voice. Copperfield gravitated towards theater. Penn and Teller were people who were going more towards comedy in the sort of the 70s era of comedy, which was going theatrical but outside the box theater, off Broadway, in that sort of style. Doug Henning was very much like the big musical sort of show, which influenced him. Old time Magic mixed with that. Siegfried and Roy were about spectacle. Harry Anderson was a guy who took street performing and put it on stage, and you had that. Since then, the two biggest names we've had in Magic, in the United States, were David Blaine and Chris Angel. And for David Blaine, it was a matter of he really figured out how to take the close-up Magic and make that work, and really create this personality that's harkened back to the Houdini stunt sort of archetype. And Chris Angel's a guy that sort of made his personality, borrowed a lot from the idea of what makes him, somebody, a musician, a rock star big, and played into that, and that was great. And then really, like, my favorite Darren Brown is a guy that got to the core of what makes for a very fascinating personality. What makes him interesting? Why is it really interesting when Darren Brown does it and not so much when some other person does it? But it's hard. I mean, you think of, other than Brown, Angel, and Blaine, it's almost over, like Copperfield, Henning, Penn and Teller, Sigfrid and Roy all had their formative periods like 40 years ago.
So, is there anything in your mind that the Magic community could do differently to help build character and build individual characters as well, and really bring this more into a theatrical sort of scenario?
Well, I don't know what the community can do, but I can certainly say that as individuals, what we can do, and that is go see plays. Go see not big plays, but little plays. Go see what's going on theatrically around you. Go watch one-person dramas. Go watch these things. Look at how people are, going on stage. And I live in LA, which is wonderful because there's a big theater community, and it's all across the board. A lot of it's not good. A lot of it's fantastic. But you go watch people go into a black box theater with just their personality and a microphone, and how do they fill an hour? And how do they do it in an entertaining way? And as a magician, you can learn a lot from that. You can say, okay, how do I structure things dramatically? How do I tell stories that aren't just patter, etc.? So, get out of the Magic Club, go see theater, small theater, little theater, all the better. That gives you, I think, will give you a much bigger understanding of what's going on.
Do you think getting involved in community theatre might be a good idea as well?
Yeah, I think that community theater can be helpful. But theater is so much more than doing Our Town or plays. I mean, theater can be one-person plays, two-person dramas and stuff, and a lot of community theater supports that. I think paying a lot of attention to that, because a lot of times what people do is, I'll talk to magicians like, oh yeah, I did theater, and they were in a big production, they're in something like that, but it's like, yeah, but go back and watch, go watch Spalding Gray. This is a guy swimming in Cambodia. This guy was a raconteur who could sit in front of a microphone and tell these riveting stories. Watch him. Watch John Leguizamo. Watch these things where it's one person, one personality driving this forward. Defending the Caveman, other different kinds of theater like that can be very, very, very helpful. Instead of trying to think of how to make it bigger, you think of how do these people drive these stories that are very centered on one person, and that can be extremely helpful.
Do you have anything to add to that, Alex?
Well, I was going to say, what you tend to find is a lot of the more successful people in general that are one-man acts are the great storytellers. You're talking about George Carlin's. You mentioned John Leguizamo, which can sit down for 2 hours and tell you stories about his life, and you'll sit there starry-eyed. Learning how to tell a story coherently and speak well, or at least speak well within your character, is somewhat important. I think that's what community theater really provides. It helps you enunciate. It helps you learn how to project yourself and project not just your voice, but who you are. Many people who do magic are their own character. You're you. You're just a louder, more obnoxious you. You take parts of your personality and really twist them.
I think that in trying to learn how to tell story, you can pick up showmanship from magicians and learn how to project your voice and how to stand and how to do this. But what really makes I think like a great storyteller, you take somebody like Kevin Smith. Kevin Smith, the director, his smodcasts in his live shows are riveting, and this guy makes it up as he goes, because what he's learned is stories have a beginning, middle, and end. He has the right amount of setup, the right amount of things that happen along the way, and then he figures out how to deliver it. He could probably watch a magician do a magic trick and then describe what he saw, and it will be far more entertaining than the magic trick itself, which then tells you what's missing. How can we go back and we fix that? And really, really good storytelling is hitting that point, not taking too long, but getting right to it, and how do you make it entertaining? And that's something that's in some ways is you just learn by doing and doing and doing and doing. You watch the evolution of some people like Kevin Smith. It's amazing to look at where he started and where he is now.
Something that you keep on touching on, and I really like the theme, is looking outside of magic for inspiration. I think too many people have been They're looking for the Theory 11s and the Penguin Magics. Just reading the emails, checking out the new tricks, checking out trailers, and not coming out from different parts of the world and experience that. My best friend was a philosophy major. You want to talk about some conversations that get really twangy and weird. You experience the different arts within the world. You said comedians, you said theater, and I think that's really important that people just haven't been, people aren't exposing themselves to right now.
But, the thing is then I'm kind of a believer in that people are going to do what they want to do. And while I think it would be helpful if you don't have an interest outside of moves or technique, then you're not going to be attracted to or want to go watch theater and do these things. And I think it's perfectly fine to say, hey, I love technique, or I love methods, or I love moves, or I love this, or I love that, and I don't think we should make people, rather than berating people for like, well, that's not magic, and that's this, I say it's not performing, or it's not performance or theater, but it's still valid, and I think that if, what sets David Copperfield, or let's say Teller apart, is, they're going to be the first people to go see new live shows, unrelated to magic. They're going to go for movies, whatever. Copperfield's an extreme movie buff. He's going to go see movies. He's going to go see theater. He's going to see whatever. They'll tell you every show that's going on in Vegas and what's going on there, because this is where their interest was. When Copperfield was 15 years old, he was sneaking into Broadway shows to try to watch them. Teller's a person that could, recall to you, great moments in various theatrical productions, because that's his interest. The same with Darren Brown. If you're not interested in those things to begin with, then it's going to be hard to make your art follow them. You can develop an interest if you want to, but...
Right, but having interests outside of the magical realm is somewhat important, being exposed to the rest of the world.
Right, and I guess what I'm saying is if you're not interested what's outside there, then you probably never will be.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But do you think that damages magic, Andrew? Or do you think that that's just what that person is doing?
I'm sorry, say that again?
I was just wondering, people not being exposed to sort of outside influences, do you think that can be damaging to magic, or do you think that that's just what they're doing and that's totally cool?
I mean, I don't worry about what one person does or the effect that where magic goes or where it doesn't. If it's going all in a great place, then great for all of us. If it's going in a bad place, then it means the person who's doing something different will stand out. And so I don't worry about sort of the well-being of magic as a whole. I'm interested in, individually people who are saying, what can I do to be better? What can I do to improve? And these are questions I ask myself all the time. Mm-hmm. And where would I, what would entertain me the most? Yeah, certainly would entertain me more. I would enjoy more of what I see if I saw people asking those sort of critical questions. But again, I don't want to tell other people how they should enjoy magic. If I think it's doing great. It's doing really well for the people who are in it.
Then, in your own opinion, what do you think, in your own opinion, makes a good magician?
What entertains me is I love to see a very, very well thought out, well developed character that, even if they're going to do a trick that I've seen before, I'm going to be excited to see how they do it. And, some of my favorite performers, take a guy like Derek Hughes. Derek Hughes, comedian, magic, hilarious. Derek Hughes is as funny as anybody I see on a stand-up comedy stage. And watching this guy perform magic, it was great. Piff the Magic Dragon. One of my favorite moments is, when this first performance is when Fool Us is, Piff, he pulls out a banana and just starts eating it in the middle of the judging. And I'm like, it's beautiful. It's like a beautiful just character moment, because that was like, for me, the idea that he thought, oh, what's natural for me to do here? I'm going to pull out a banana and just eat it, because I'm kind of like this whatever kind of I don't care kind of attitude. And things like that just delight me to no end.
Yeah, I saw that. I thought that was really brilliant as well.
And let me make it clear. Everybody else doesn't mean go start eating a banana in a thing, but it's like for his character and his moment is he had this perfect, little thing that sold you on what this person was and what they did. And it wasn't like he wasn't trying to stack weirdness on top of weirdness, which is often the case of people who play eccentric characters. he was playing a guy in a dragon suit. His role was a guy in a dragon suit who is just sort of offbeat kind of guy, which is far more interesting as somebody who really thinks he's a dragon, because then you get a disconnect. In comedy, when you work on, let's say, improv, one of the things they teach you is don't play crazy people, don't play children who are really young, because then people can't relate to you. Nothing has any context to what you do, and that's very, very key to understanding character.
So, do you think that what is a good magician now? Do you think that has changed since you started magic, or do you think it's kind of always the same thing progressively?
I would say that what's happened now is technology helps things that technology is helpful for. The technical proficiency of young magicians today is incredible, and we see this through cardistry. We see this in flourishes. We have been able to take classic effects routines. The amount of acceleration that's happened in the last 15 or 20 years with certain stuff has been unprecedented. There is some of the finest close-up magic that's ever existed has been created or improved upon in the last 15 and 20 years because of the internet. And that's because the internet for now is sort of this. As the internet expands and becomes a bigger experience, as we start putting more boxes in our on our big TVs that are connected to the internet, as we start experimenting things with virtual reality and stuff, like I've got an Oculus Rift headgear here and other stuff. As we start increasing the experience of which we can interact with people remotely, whatever, we're going to move from this space, which is perfect for things with the hands, to a much bigger space, and we may see, it will progress by itself because the technology is going to encompass a wider experience.
I'm sure I'm going to sound silly here, but what is an Oculus Rift?
It's a VR goggles. He's talking to a techno buff over here now, so my ears perked up as soon as you said you have an Oculus.
So this is part of the future here, Lootah. Facebook acquired this company, and inside here is the goggles. You put them on, and if you certain software, certain sorts of movies, whatever, as you turn your head, everything moves around with you and appears to be in 3D.
Oh,
right?
wow.
And so it's it's a few $100 for a development kit, so I'm working on it for purposes. So this is becoming, like, now it's CES, there are tons of companies coming out with their own versions of this stuff. So you're going to see in the next, over the next year or so, this is becoming, a bigger thing. And like anything else, at first we're going to go like, what the hell do we do with it? Google came out with this thing. It's called Project Cardboard. This is literally a cardboard box with 2 lenses in it. I take an Android phone and I place the phone inside of there, and wherever I look, it creates a 3D reality around me. And as for performers, is one of the first things people in capturing with it has been live performances. I think there's a Paul McCartney concert Google has that you can watch, using cardboard. And that's been a big area, is to say that one of the cool things you can do with it is capture live performances. And so we're watching the screen get bigger and bigger and bigger. As it gets bigger, you want to fill it with more things. He's got the leap. Was that the leap motion?
I got a leap right here.
That's right. It's a leap for watching the hands move.
Yeah, and this guy projects a foot cube right around here. You put your hand in it, and it completely tracks your wrist all the way up to your fingers, every single joint. Tracks both hands from both sides. Oh man, see, techno junkie.
Yeah. So I guess my point is, that what we've seen so far has been what you would expect when the most effective magic you can communicate on a broad scale outside of regular television is stuff that fits in this little box. But as the box gets bigger, it's going to be interesting to see what happens.
Sorry, go on, Alex.
I said magic is an evolution. It's technology. It's going to evolve with technology. It has to. People aren't always going to believe this. As much as you want them to, people will not always believe this.
Andrew, on the subject of technology, how do you think things like YouTube and Facebook and Twitter are affecting magic?
Well, YouTube is probably the main reason we've seen this explosion of very, very talented young people, where a long time ago, if you wanted knowledge, you had to somebody had to tell you the name of a trick, then you had to find the book, and then you had to hope the book was well written enough and it was to a learning style that worked for you. Video instruction, I think, is fantastic, and I know some dinosaurs like to criticize video instruction, and not everything should be explained through video. I'd rather read Darren Brown's thoughts on something than necessarily have somebody say show it, because it's a different experience. But video instruction has certainly helped the technical proficiency of Magic. It has absolutely improved dramatically. First, we saw that with VHS tapes. That helped, and then DVD, and now video instruction's wonderful. That's what YouTube has done. Facebook has been great as an organizing platform. We're here because you guys are able to reach out to people through Facebook. And you think about this is, your Magic Club, the Circle Magic Club, how, where are your members? Where are you located?
Well, most of our members are located on Facebook.
Right. So, I'm talking to, Lootah, you're in Brighton. Alex, where are you right now?
I'm in Phoenix, Arizona.
He's in Phoenix, Arizona. I'm in Los Angeles. We're going to have people in just about every time zone watching this, paying attention to what we're doing. That's one of the beautiful, beautiful, amazing things. And you guys, you're young enough to take it. Just take it for granted. You just assume that you can have a club with people from around the world participate in real time. And it's wonderful that it's cheap. You don't even think about the cost of doing this. And watching the evolution of that has been wonderful. We would do, back when we first started iTricks and these sort of things first came about, we would start doing video hangouts, not Google, but like using, some of these other like chat cam or whatever kind of stuff. And what was fascinating for me is we'd start these and you'd have maybe 10 or 12 people hanging out, and there might be some kid from Malaysia watching who didn't speak any English at all, but just wanted to be part of it and got excited every time a deck of cards showed up or whatever, and he was participating. He was part of something because nobody in his town, nobody around there was interested in Magic, but for him to spend 2 hours on a video feed like this was picking up some of the stuff or being part of it or exposed to it was a wonderful experience. And that's a beautiful, amazing thing. That's incredible. I'm lucky. I live 12 minutes away from the Magic Castle. If I want to, I can get in my car right now, go to the Magic Castle and hang out, which I might do tonight, and I can be around, magicians from around the world. The internet has made that available to everybody, and that's incredible. So maybe the performing bar hasn't been as pushed as much as it could be or will be, but the social thing has been fantastic. Magic's bigger than ever is. More people can experience what we love about Magic, and it makes me very, very happy to know that you didn't have to be geographically or lucky or whatever to have that exposure.
Yeah, and obviously there's Magic clubs popping up all over the internet as well.
Mm-hmm. Like when I was a kid, like I had bad experiences at Magic clubs. It was just, I'd show up at one, I'd get some old guy at the door telling me, acting like a bouncer, just discouraging me from going there because he didn't want a bunch of young kids in there, and that was not cool. Where now there's a much, much more inclusive environment,
Right.
Yeah. Alex, you got anything to say? Sorry, you look like you were about to say something.
A pretty similar experience I had with my local Magic clubs out here in Arizona. We don't have very much of anything. Luckily, all in the UK, you guys all live within 2 hours from each other, and you're, a half an hour away from the Magic Castle, hour away from the Magic Castle. There's not a single Magic club out here, so I can absolutely sympathize with that sentiment. And the question I kind of had was, how do you feel about the move from brick and mortar style learning to the online video chat mentoring procedure that's been going on now? Because brick and mortar shops are just going down left and right now. So it's almost hard to find a meeting place for magicians other than Facebook.
There is a trade-off. With everything, there is a trade-off. And as a teenager, I worked in a brick-and-mortar magic shop. I worked in Magical Moments in South Florida. And that was a neat place because we would bring in magicians from around the world. First time, I saw, watched, Rocco Solano, David Roth, Jeff McBride, people that you could maybe go see at a magic convention, but to be able to come to your local area and local magic shop and to see that, and when you had more shops there, I think there was probably more of that going on. The problem is that, in magic, part of the reason why brick and mortar shops went away is we didn't put enough value on those things, and we didn't, and I'd see this too, because like I would organize. Like I remember I brought Jerry Andrus to come do like a teach-in in my city, and I had the group that showed up just wanted to get a couple clever little tricks to do and walk away. They didn't care or understand who Jerry Andrus was, and I could understand, and this was somebody that was like 12 years ago, 15 years ago that I put on. And I understood why the brick and mortar shops went away. Is because some places there would be people who would, but you can't keep something alive if people don't understand what the value is. So, and brick and mortar shops too. I mean, the way a lot of those places are run, just the way product selection worked, things like that. These were things done out of passion, like passion. They weren't always the best run businesses, so you can understand how easily it was going to be for the internet to displace them. Which it's sad, but the upside though is that because the internet makes it much, much easier to organize things and put things together, you don't need a brick and mortar shop to sustain something like that. It's now you can use Facebook local profiles, etc., to find out who's everybody within a 30-mile radius. Can you organize stuff? Can you put things together? So there's a trade-off. We lose that, but then we can find a way to get it back in some other way.
Yeah, and I think that it's not so much. I mean, a lot of people might not necessarily agree with me. It's not so much a hugely negative thing or a hugely positive thing. It is just a change, isn't it? At the end of the day, that's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, by the way, Alex, I just saw that you actually posted a question on Full Circle Magic, so I'll just ask that now. And that was when you were on... Yeah. Do you want to ask it, or do you want me to ask it? Okay, I'll ask it then. He seems to have frozen. Okay, so it was, were there any participants that got seriously angry with you on Don't Trust Andrew Mayne, for instance, when you handcuffed random people to things?
Okay, so, when I saw that you were going to...
Alex, we can't hear you.
I'll try to answer the question as Lootah presented it to me. So, fortunately for me, I've had some background in producing television, being involved in reality television, and I actually had worked in film too as an extra. I used to go work on, let's say, a cruise ship, and then spend some time, if I had some time off for a couple months or whatever, waiting for the next big gig to come through. I would go and work as an extra, as a PA or whatever, and I saw what happens when you're at that part of that ecosystem, when you're the person brought in just for a few hours or whatever, or if you're the person there when the cameras are there and they ask you to participate. And I thought, one of the things I wanted to do with my show was to make sure that everybody I used, everybody who participated, everybody who I did something to, understood they were appreciated. And it can be hard when you shoot, stuff on the street, with several hundred people. You figure we had probably shot maybe close to 1,000 people were involved at some point. I don't know. I'm trying to think of the total numbers, but I mean, I that not things that never even made it, but it can be very, very hard, to keep track of that stuff. The thing is, I realized that what I wanted to do was every time I did something with somebody, I'm constantly watching to see how far am I pushing them, how far am I pushing this person, because I want to push them far enough that I'm going to get a really cool reaction, but not too far that they're going to be angry. So of the hundreds of people that we had, we always have to get people to sign releases after we use them. We only had only two people refused to sign the release. One person didn't want to because they weren't supposed to be there that day, and they're afraid either their boss or their wife or their lover was going to find out. The other person was just some girl that as soon as she saw the cameras, she had some sort of like breakdown. She actually had like a schizophrenic sort of reaction. I didn't even start anything yet, and it felt bad for her. But that was it. That was it. We had a really good thing because after every single thing, as soon as they called cut, I thanked the person. I appreciated the person. I told them I was grateful that they had a sense of humor, whatever. I made them feel like a human being. And that's why, things work really well. And on the show, we make it look like I'm, the jerk that just ends it and runs off, which I would do. I mean, I would do that. I'd run away from somebody. Then I would come back and, let them know that, I was very grateful that they had that experience. I didn't go run away to go do the next trick or do the next setup or play like I was some sort of star. I was grateful. I've been there, you know. I've been an extra. I've done all that sort of stuff. I understand what it's like. I've been a person on a street and had somebody come up and, you know, news crews record, get this, you know, as soon as they're done with the microphone in their face, they walk away and somebody shoves a clipboard in front of you and you feel used.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. I was just going to ask as well, because we were talking about it just before we went live, and I was just going to ask you to tell us on air how you got into podcasting.
You know, I'd always been interested in broadcasting and communicating in different ways, and I used to work for the amazing Randy, and Randy had a radio show that was local in South Florida, and I used to be a guest on that, or a regular co-host of the show, and then when he stopped doing it on local radio, we thought, wouldn't it be cool to do this on the internet? And this is pre-podcasting. Podcasting hadn't even been, you know, a term yet. So we did a thing called the James Randi Show for the James Randi Foundation, and we would record these, and we'd broadcast these things live using, you know, real audio, whatever the antiquated system was at the time. And that evolved for a while, and that was sort of fun to do. And so I launched a thing called the Magic Radio Show, which was a thing I did with my buddy Jeff Ruttenberg, and we talked about magic. And then I got out of it for a while. Technically speaking, I mean, it was a challenge to do that stuff because it was just not as easy as the solutions there are now. Then back in 2006, when I started iTricks with Justin Robert Young, we thought it'd be fun to start a podcast dedicated to magic. And so Justin was the perfect host for that. He has a great voice. And that was really his baby. So we started the iTricks podcast, and that's been going on for 8 years, and then a couple years after that, I started the Weird Things podcast with Justin and Brian Brushwood, which we record every Sunday now. So weirdthings.com if you want to check that out.
Okay. Obviously, you know, if you do podcasts, you're considered a podcaster. Some people consider you, obviously, to be a magician. What do you consider yourself predominantly?
Lootah, that's a good question. I don't know. I don't have a simple answer to that. I didn't have business cards for the longest time because I didn't know what to put on there. And, you know, I used to tell people, saying that I was a writer was kind of the easiest thing to do because I wrote magic books. I did that, and that didn't involve a request usually to perform like it happens when we tell people we're magicians. And then, you know, every Uber driver in LA is an aspiring writer, so if you tell them you're a writer, they want to hear your list of credits and compare them against their own, which is, you know, its own interesting experience. I use the term producer. I say that, you know, because either produce television, I produce, you know, I write books, I have a film project, a couple of them, and so that's probably the douchiest term to use too, but maybe it's the most appropriate.
Well, I suppose it all comes down to how you want to be perceived yourself, though, isn't it? At the end of the day.
Yeah, but also it comes down to is understanding how people perceive you wanting to be perceived. Mm-hmm, and that's a thing too that you know, I see. You know, when you're outside of LA, people use credits one way. Where you're in LA, people use credits differently because they're cheap, they're easy. You know, I can throw a rock in here and, you know, hit an Emmy-winning writer from, you know, the front of my place, partially because there's a Starbucks here in the middle of Burbank. But, you know, then you have to understand what considers important there. And, you know, if everybody's a writer in this town, then being a best-selling author is certainly a better thing to be able to add to it. If you're a writer's convention filled with best-selling authors, having a movie being made has value. Every place it's different. It shifts.
So would you say, depending on who you're talking to, changes how you're obviously introducing yourself as well?
It shouldn't. I mean, I think that, you know, if it depends on often it's how people become aware of you. For instance, you know, when I do, like, with my TV show, is it like I met with, like, you know, my network had no idea that I was a writer, that I was like a best-selling writer. You know, it was funny. When I've met with, you know, literary world, I've met with, like, people, I've had, like, meetings about film rights and stuff like that, and they had no idea I did a TV show. And that's sort of interesting to me, is that you know, I you know, have sold options and stuff to studios and stuff that just weren't aware of this other side, which is, you know, it can be helpful because it certainly rounds you out, but it's interesting to me. You know, people are aware of their own world.
Okay, just wondering as well. I actually got this question quite early on, but I completely overlooked it. And that's who would you say are some of your biggest influences?
You know, in Magic, early on, my biggest influence was David Copperfield. I was, and still I'm a big fan. And then Penn and Teller. And then from there, growing out from Magic into performing arts, Steve Martin was a huge influence. I love Steve Martin. And then finding out about, Joel Hodgson of Mystery Science Theater, watching his old Magic comedy and understanding that. And then expanding even further out as a writer, I loved Michael Crichton. I loved Robert Heinlein and Isaac Asimov. Those people I thought were just, very, very compelling to me. Tom Clancy. And then storytelling-wise, breaking down how certain people approach things. Take somebody like Jim Henson. Jim Henson, you want to talk about a role model. This guy created the Muppets. This guy was the voice of Kermit the Frog. And then you get into an influence like Walt Disney, who was the voice of Mickey Mouse originally. And this is a guy that created or helped shape so many forms of entertainment we're used to today. So they just keep branching out.
Is there anyone who, even today, you watch their work and you're still just like, wow, that was really something?
A lot of people. Every time you go see something new Penn and Teller put into their show, you're impressed. Copperfield, the same place. When he puts some new twist onto something or figures out a different direction to go with it. I think that a lot of directors and stuff that you go, what comes next for them? James Cameron, for example. Christopher Nolan. Christopher Nolan is, arguably I think one of the finest working directors today, and looking at how he approaches stuff is encouraging. And watching the development of some people too is great. I love to watch somebody at one point and to see how they've evolved over time. And a great example of that's David Fincher. David Fincher's first film was the very problematic production of Alien 3. And Russian production, things were out of his control. This guy started with Alien 3, which is, we'll say it's not the best of the series. And, just delivered Gone Girl. And Gone Girl I thought was an amazing movie. And I think that this guy's continuously evolved, and you watch this guy learn. He started off a very, very clever, talented person involved. Ben Affleck, okay? Argo, amazing. He did, when he did The Town. Town came out the same summer as Scorsese's Shutter Island, and Scorsese's an icon. But I thought The Town was technically a better film. Who would think that you'd be saying that Ben Affleck made a better movie that year than Martin Scorsese? I love watching people evolve. I guess that's my point. Is I love to watch people who continue to grow and change over time, and that's an important lesson for us. Is how would you do something differently today than yesterday, and not just because you made a different choice. Why is that choice different?
Speaking of evolving, obviously there's a lot of up-and-coming talent at the moment, and a lot of magicians who are obviously, learning online, self-teaching and stuff. If you could give advice to somebody who's just getting started out now, what advice would you give to them?
I think first is to have a clear understanding of what you want to get out of it. It doesn't mean you can't change your mind over time, but understand why you want, and don't feel pressure from everybody else. Often what will happen is someone will have an interest, and maybe they'll start taking lessons from another magician, and that magician will try to shape and form them into what they want to be. If I start talking to you long enough, I'm going to tell you how to be what Andrew Mayne wants to be. You've got to have a clear idea of what you want to be. And if all you want is to pick up some really cool things to impress people at work or at the bar or at school or whatever, then that's fine. Understand that. Don't feel compelled you've got to take your magic in some other direction, and go towards places that are going to help you do that. So my first piece of advice is understand where you want to go. If your ambition is you want to be the most famous magician in the world, that's fine too. That's equally valid. And often when I talk to people with any kind of ambition, they're often hesitant to say the real thing they want to do. Maybe the actor wants to direct. Maybe the director wants to write. Maybe these people don't, are afraid to say this because they don't want to be looked upon as being silly. But I live in a town filled with ambition. So I think have a clear idea of what you want and shoot for that, because you're going to hit closer to that than what you don't shoot for.
Alex, do you have anything to say?
I believe that my mic works. Is it not? Can you guys hear me now? I
can hear you much better now.
Okay, good. Okay, so I did some stuff. Hopefully that works. I a couple of things. One thing that was told to me, and maybe you'll be able to, from a successful person's standpoint, and I've heard it different ways, but the way it was put best to me was you're just as likely to fail at something you hate doing as something you love doing, so why would you do the thing you hate? So a lot of times, like you find what you're doing, just go out and do it. Go and find a way to do it and do it well enough that people are going to pay you to do that thing.
Certainly. You know, I'm a big believer in kind of throwing your hat over the fence. I in high school, I either wanted to be a scientist or a magician. By my senior year, I realized that my grades were not good enough to get me into MIT, but they were perfect for a cruise ship magician. The problem is, you know, an 18-year-old cruise ship magician, there wasn't a lot of opportunity for. If I was 23, people would want to hire me. So I sent out my videos, put out my promo material, got calls back from agents and cruise lines and told them I was 23. And I got hired. I worked out of high school headlining on cruise ships. I wasn't ready. I was raw. I was still trying to figure things out. But I was able to bluff my way far enough and far enough to keep that going and sustaining that. And you know, that was the kind of person that I was. I don't encourage people, like, don't, you know, I'm one of these people, like, tell people not to do it. The really creative ones or ambitious ones were going to do it anyways. And that was my goal, is I couldn't wait. I didn't want to go spend 4 years away in school or whatever before I found out if I wanted to become a cruise ship magician or not. I just did it. And, you know, that's my thing, is like, just go do it. Now, I could have told my younger 18-year-old version of myself a lot of things I could have done to have made myself a better performer and save myself some trouble. But didn't happen, wasn't there. I had to find these things out for myself. And my advice is, the really, really ambitious people out there, you know, you're just going to do it. But find the knowledge, respect the knowledge, find the knowledge. That was the problem. Is it took me a long time to learn very, very simple things. Still has.
In your eyes, what do you call success?
It's everybody. It's, you know, for everybody it's different. You know, my father is a very successful guy. My father was a federal agent, was a federal investigator, brought about some very, very, you know, career-making cases, was very highly decorated, very well respected as a federal agent, and has had an amazing career doing that. Now my father is semi-retired, but he has a business involving like reselling fly rods and fishing reels online. Loves that. He gets up every day at 6:30 in the morning, goes out on his boat, fishes for about an hour, goes back home, sleeps for another hour or two, then gets up and does some stuff for his business. Then he's involved, and he's very socially active. He's involved with a couple different community organizations relating to fisheries and waterway cleanups and fly fishing, etc. My dad has a great life for my father. My dad does. You know, my dad's very active. My dad is very self-actualized. I'm not a fisherman. I hate fishing. That life is not for me. But for my father's won. My father's won at life. He's done amazing things to help, you know, to help this world. He still does that, and he finds time to fish and do the thing he loves. That's a very successful life. And I think each of us has to find our version of that. I don't know what my version of that is yet. I still have fire. I'm still out there trying to do things and change the world in a big way.
I think that in life, though, you never quite work out where you're going until you get there. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And I think that, you know, knowing who you are is helpful. You know, I remember reading once that the man with the highest IQ on record, his job was, he was a bouncer. That was the thing he did. He was a bouncer. Here's a guy with an extremely high IQ. Now, we could get into, you know, at what point is a high IQ a handicap versus whatever, and, you know, how much you need to really succeed at whatever. But anyhow, the thing was, he was a bouncer, but was always reading a book. This guy loved to read books. Read a book a day. And that's what he did. This guy, his life for him was finding enough money to pay the bills so he could do the thing that he loved, which was just to read. Now, maybe the guy could have cured cancer, maybe not. Maybe the guy could have been, you know, taken over a small country and, you know, led a genocide. Who knows? But for him, he was perfectly happy doing what he was doing. And I don't think that's any worse or better than if he decided he was going to play chess and become the world's ranking chess champion. That sounds really boring to me. But for some people, that's really exciting.
Alex, have you got anything to say?
I had a few thoughts from earlier when my mic was off that were kind of mulling around actually. You were talking about some of the different guys in Magic, and I was wondering who of the newer guys, of the up-and-comers, you were talking about watching people grow. Who of the newer crowd maybe have you watched grown and maybe you keep an eye on? Or maybe one of your favorite new guys who's performing right now?
I mean, I've been lucky. I'm going to bias. You know, there are people who I've worked and been around who I think are super creative people, who watching how their brains work is just a joy. You know, like take you know, Danny Garcia. You know, I love Danny. Danny and Rico helped me, work with me on my TV project. You know, as thinkers, those guys are great. You know, Danny's got this, you know, amazing reputation as a creator, and deservedly so. It's exciting to see him work. Blake Voigt, that kid is so smart, so clever. You know, the things that he comes up with are great. You know, Kyle Marlette's another really clever guy. You know, Callan Morelli. You know, there are some really, you know, when I first started creating Magic, and just because you're living in your own little bubble, and because, you know, Magic wasn't big like it was now on the internet, you know, it was harder. You know, everybody I knew who was a Magic creator, you know, was like 50. You know, and now I see these young guys who are brilliant, and it's exciting, and that's you know, that's just a handful of some of the people I think that are just creating some really cool stuff. And to see where they're going to go, you know, is exciting.
Speaking of Magic creators, have you created anything yourself or not?
In Magic?
Yeah. Like, do you consider yourself a creator as well or not?
I try to. I mean, that's how I made my living for years, was as a Magic creator. You know, I released between 40 and 50 books and DVDs on Magic effects and stuff, and I consulted for Penn and Teller and David Blaine and that, and so I haven't, you know, put anything out in the last 2 years or so, but I guess that's a long time in the internet age. But yeah, I mean, that's you know, that was when I gravitated away from, you know, doing performing on resorts and ships and stuff like that. That's what I did.
Well, okay, so then you've created effects for other people, you've created effects for yourself, you've done consulting, you've done stage, you've done cruise ship, you've done that television. Out of all those that massive repertoire, what was your favorite?
Of things I've created? I mean,
things to do in general. What did you enjoy doing? Did you enjoy the performing, the creating, say, like the consulting with other people and the collaboration? What would you enjoy the most?
You know, the thing I've enjoyed the most is when I have the most amount of resources that I get kind of sole discretion to figure out how to use or employ, for better or for worse. And, you know, in create, like my favorite little creations of things, the tricks that I came up with that I loved, like to this day, is things like Ghost Bills. Yeah, that's still kind of one of my favorite kind of little things I love. And then in each area, there's something I really liked a lot. In creating like inexpensive illusions, I have a trick called In Half, which is a cardboard, you know, how cutting yourself in half using cardboard boxes and stuff. And I loved kind of reverse engineering, you know, that illusion into something that could be built for $40 or $50, which technically is kind of a neat thing. Theatrically, we could discuss the merits of that. In television, the favorite thing I did was, you know, I've done a trick where I steal people's cars in front of them. I take a photo of it on their phone, and then I make the car vanish on the phone, and it's like a watch steal, but it's done with their car. And being able to do that, you know, that was one of my most fun experiences ever. Was, you know, the first time I ever did that was actually for a demo reel, was going to a parking lot at night with a film crew and stealing like a dozen cars over and over, and each time the person standing right next to me turns around and sees their car is gone. It was pure. It was just fun. It was a big trick, but it was personal and small, and that was one of the most exciting things I ever got to do.
What's it like doing film work in comparison to stage work, in your opinion? Like, from a Magic point of view, how is it different?
So, you know, the challenge in television is that you can do anything on TV now, and it's establishing credibility. And, you know, and it's the same problem in stage. You know, David Copperfield can go through every effort in the world to bring a totally random person up on stage, and there'll be somebody who will still think that they're a stooge, even though it's clear that they're not. You know, and that's the dilemma in TV is you have to sort of, be consistent and go as far as you can without it becoming boring or tedious as far as, who these people are, how they came about to be there, whatever. And I think that, the challenge in television is big part of its time. If you think about, like, if you do a card trick for somebody, have somebody pick a card, put it back in the deck, shuffle it, and locate the card. If you time from the moment that deck of cards comes out of your pocket to the point of the reveal and that person confirming how long that is their card, that can be minutes. That can't work on TV. You have to figure out a much, much shorter path to get to there. You have to shrink down the tricks, the way things work, whatever. And hopefully you can do that and not have to edit for time or whatever. But the reality is that television, it's got to be super fast paced, and that's a big challenge.
Yeah, attention spans. Oh, sorry, Alex.
Oh no, you're fine. I was just gonna ask, how hard was it to edit your videos? Because like I saw the just watched the stealing the car video today. I watched through that again. And how hard was it to edit that to try to battle the idea of things like camera tricks? Because you get so many people go, "Well, it's a camera trick." There's
it's in anything. You're by the time you figure out what you're going to do for television, you're not going to use a method that you're going to hopefully that you need to use TV to shave time off, because then that's just bad planning, you go by what's that person's experience there. Everything I do, the person is really there. Everything I do, I'm usually borrowing something from them. They're personally invested in something like that, and it's not just, hey, look at me do this kind of magic, which is fine, but it's just not my style of doing stuff. And so, you're trying to tell a story. This is what happened here. This is what happened there. And would the person there, is that their experience of what happened? And that you have to find what your focus is going to be, from what point of view. And for my show, it's that person next to me. What is it? What's it like if you were there with me, watching their reaction to it?
That's what you're trying to convey on the television screen itself. Yeah,
you're trying to. Yeah, how do you communicate this? How do you get this across? And you have to choose that very, very carefully and figure out how to, from conceiving something that's going to do this. And sometimes the simple, and it's amazing because, like, when you watch some of the first, earliest World's Greatest Magic specials, you would see some of the finest magicians in the world performing magic that just did not work on TV. Not because the method was apparent, because it was just boring or just too long or this or that. And in trying to understand what's that happy medium between something that has the credibility but is entertaining.
Right.
Why do you think that something that you could watch in person, like maybe, I don't know, a stage illusion, for example, which might take maybe 3 to 4 minutes to pull off, what would you say makes that watchable in person but not on TV?
So, when you're performing, and it depends, like I've seen it on stage where it's not very watchable. You watch a stage illusion, let's say like a sword box.
Mm-hmm.
Putting the swords into the box and taking the swords out of the box takes a lot of time. You watch a really good performer do it, they try to figure out how to solve that problem. I used to do the mismade illusion. So the mismade, you cut the girl into 4 pieces. To cut the girl into 4 pieces, you need 6 blades, right? And so 6 blades going into a box is boring. Now, Doug Henning solved this problem by having like 4 other people helping him. When it comes to make that work on television, you got to figure out those equivalents. How do you get into this as quickly as you can when the process is no longer entertaining? And when you're watching a live performance, there can be several places for your eye to go and things to entertain you. You're at a different pace. You have a different setup. Pacing starts at one point. You're sitting down. You're engaged. You're watching what's going on. When you're watching television, you're in an environment where things are much more fast-paced. There's a lot more information coming at you. It's why television is different than film. In a movie, I've got 6 or 7 minutes to pull you into a movie and get you invested in that movie, and so I can have a different pacing. If you're at home watching a TV show, I've got 60 or 80 seconds to pull you into that TV show before your attention goes elsewhere. And that's an example of where these things change. If you're at a play, I got 15 minutes.
Because you're invested. You've already invested your time within that.
Yeah, and the option to get up and walk away isn't there. You can walk out of a movie, but we're hesitant to do that. But we know I can get you, and that option's not in the back of your head. You're in front of a TV, your hand on the remote like this. You can go away at any point.
Yeah, I suppose, you've instantly got that opportunity to go, do you know what? I'm going to change channel.
Mm-hmm.
So I suppose that... Sorry, Alex. No, go on.
I was going to say, now, because you're a podcaster, how do you feel that internet television is going to be affecting Magic in that same way? Because internet television, with the lack of the same type of commercials or commercial breaks, it can be any length you want, from YouTube up to hour-long specials, like I believe Bo Burnham did an hour and a half comedy special just on YouTube.
I think that it's going to create some neat opportunities to sort of play with that platform. Our attention spans when we watch Netflix is different than when we watch cable. If you're sitting in front of Netflix and you might decide, I wish Netflix did trailers for stuff, to be honest with you. But Netflix, once you commit to something, you're going to go all the way through it. As we, become, as the internet and our televisions tend to merge more and more, I think there's going to be a lot of cool opportunities. And the problem, though, of course, is that to get somebody to something is still very, very, very hard, on the internet, because there's so many more things competing for your attention. The economies are different. Television can afford, spend a couple $1 million on a Magic television special. Nobody's going to be doing that on the internet for any time soon. David Blaine's done some streaming events, but he saves the really good stuff for when ABC comes calling and asks him to do something awesome. That won't always be the case. It's not that one thing's going away or the other, but there's going to be kind of a merger for that. But the key is going to be having a really, really strong personality to sell that.
Do you think that all this technology like Google Hangouts, YouTube, do you think that that's going to open up a lot of opportunity for people that are getting started to build up their name, doing like live events but over the internet to build up some kind of basis to start building a career off of?
What we haven't seen yet, and there's a reason I made even though I was getting very involved in internet and online several years ago and starting iTricks and podcasts, etc., I made a very, very big commitment to get into television because I understood how the platforms function differently. And right now, there are some magicians who've had some very fantastic, successful viral videos, but the people, their personalities are still have not, they've not become known, you start looking at your top YouTube celebrities. I think Brian Brushwood might be the #1, might be the most subscribed to magician on YouTube. He passed the 1 million subscriber mark now, but his stuff is instructional. And so there's a lot of people with instructional stuff, which is a wonderful medium for YouTube. But as far as performers, there are some performers who've made have some traction, but I don't know if there's a longevity to it. And not to say that there won't be, but we haven't seen. YouTube came about 2006. In the 8 years since then, we have yet to see the celebrity YouTube magician who's not doing instructional material.
So you reckon that with YouTube, the demand is more for how-tos as opposed to watching a show, for example?
So far, and also, the problem with Magic is that Magic on television, it burns up material. Your most successful YouTube personality, you take PewDiePie for example, and if you guys don't know who PewDiePie, anybody else out there listening doesn't know who PewDiePie is, you need to know.
Successful YouTube personality, period. He makes the most money on YouTube.
He's hilarious. He's a guy. He does basically, to describe it simply, he does walkthroughs of video games, but he's this very excitable Swedish guy. He's kind of like the modern Jim Carrey in a sense. But part of what goes into making PewDiePie successful is being able to create a ton of content. If you're a and that's the thing about YouTube, and that's a hard part about online. To be a really successful online personality, you need to continuously produce, and you need to have a big pile of this is what people can go look at. TV consumes stuff at an incredible rate. When I was planning for the first season of my show, we did 100 tricks. We did 100 tricks in our first season, 100 magic effects. I started with a list of several hundred, and then whittled that down, then brought in Danny and Rico, who came in and contributed stuff. It burns through material crazy, and we had a tier 1 cable network budget to sort of manage this. When you're doing stuff on YouTube, you don't. I have friends who do weekly YouTube shows, and coming up with really good magic week after week. They can come up with really cool, clever, small, and things like that. But it's hard to come up with, oh my God, this is amazing. You're not going to you're not going to top yourself every week. You're not going to come out with that much content. It's hard. It's just the way it is now. And I could be wrong. I could be very wrong on this, by the way. And I'm always delighted when I am wrong on that. But right now, as it is, that's the hard thing, is to be a breakthrough YouTube personality. You got to fill that space, and it's hard to come up with that much stuff.
So you said that you did about 100 tricks in that series, yeah? Mm-hmm. Just so for some kind of gauge, how long was the actual series itself?
Season 1, 13 episodes. 13 half-hour episodes. What's that?
Sorry, how long were the episodes?
Half hour.
Half hour. Okay, yeah, that is burning through very fast.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there was, and I'm going to butcher this entire quote because I do things like that, and I don't remember names and dates and stuff like that, but it was a guy who said variety arts were for people who watch Groundhog's Day and thought it was a great idea. You got to play the same show over and over, and everybody goes, wow. So burning through material is really rough, which is why you don't see a lot of difference, because once a guy finds a secret, they're going to hold on to it for dear life until they've run it into the ground or been figured out, and then they'll move on.
Yeah, it's a challenge. We went from 80 years ago, 90 years ago in the vaudeville stage, somebody would do the same 8 minutes for their entire life. That the act they did at 20 was the act they did at 70, and when you want to do television, you have to. I love the idea of television because as a magic creator, I've got tons of books and resources to draw stuff from, and databases of ideas and stuff that I think would be great to go do. Internet is even, I have, when I talk to people about internet stuff, one of the problems is that people often say, hey, I want to do a show, and I'm like, well, that sounds like a good TV show. I don't know if that's an internet show, and those lines are merging, but we can point to content like Orange is the New Black and shows like that, but those are the rarities. Those are the lost leaders funded by Netflix to call attention to what they're doing. Most stuff being produced like that is still on cable television, and because the cable television environment and market still makes money, and that's where it goes. To be, an internet thing, things that would work or could work in that space, to create that kind of content. If you have a gimmick you can use over and over again, like, Kreskin or Mentalism or stuff like that, that might be it. As long as there's more people who don't know how you do it than know how you do it. We watch Kreskin's show, and it's, he's got, one trick that he spends doing it, for an hour and a half, but to the people who don't know, it's the most riveting, entertaining thing that can happen. So, I mean, that could certainly happen. And it probably wouldn't be a thing that most magicians would look at and go, oh, we like this. That's something to think about, too, is that, the first big YouTube, internet person successful for being a performer, not an explainer, might be doing something that the rest of us are going to look at and go, well, he's just doing billet stuff, or he's just doing cold reading, or he's doing this.
Yeah, but I suppose it's the character, isn't it? It's character and your ability to continuously create, like you said.
Well, I was going to say a lot of magicians that I find tend to market to magicians, and they seek approval in other magicians as opposed to worrying. They worry more about what other magicians think than really even their audiences. And I think that's where a lot of guys are getting their success.
I've seen that a lot.
Absolutely.
He's a magician.
Yeah, there are acts that are great for a magic convention. And you take, some of the top FISM winners, some of the top placing FISM acts, to a layperson would kind of all look the same. Be like, no. His doves came from his hands and not a, this or whatever. It came from his lapel, not a sleeve. You'd be like, oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah. And it's something that's really, really different and changes things. Is we don't react necessarily with positivity. When David Blaine came on the scene, it was the Magic community was upset by the fact that here was a guy doing Invisible Deck and Scotch and Soda on primetime network television. But guess what? The way he did it was fantastic, and the way it came across as entertainment was amazing. But we couldn't see what that was going on there.
At the end of the day, a lot of people tend to go, you can't use that tool in that scenario. Well, at the end of the day, my view is if the tool works, why not use it?
Well, it's again, that's what it comes down to. It's entertainment. I was at a party the other night, and the subject came up of The Walking Dead, the show The Walking Dead. I watched like the first season. I thought it was fun, and then the second season was just the pacing was too slow for me. I tuned out of it. But I followed the success of The Walking Dead certainly. And there's somebody mentioned Walking Dead, and this woman says, "Oh, Walking Dead's horrible. Nobody likes that." And I'm like, "Hey, hold on a second. It's like the most popular show on television. It's an international hit. How can you say nobody likes it when it's that successful?" It's just well, and she loves zombies. She was in her own she had her own favorite zombie sort of stories or whatever. But for her, she had very, very poor understanding of theory of mind. Theory of mind is understanding how other people perceive things. And because she didn't like it, and because some of her friends didn't like it, that was the universe. That was the universe. Nobody likes it. Well, what about the 16 million people that tuned into the last episode?
What she meant was nobody that I know, nobody that matters to me likes it.
But she couldn't differentiate. She had no understanding of the difference between that. She didn't understand the difference between her friends and the rest of the world. And that's a thing that we all fall victim to this in our own way. One of the things that will happen for me is if I see a movie and I don't care for it and everybody else likes it, I'll go see it again. I'll try to understand why other people like it because I want to take how I see things and how other people see things and understand that. And I don't fault people for liking the things that they like. And there are, I think that's a very, very poor way to look at stuff. And so, the more there's a disconnect, the more I want to understand because as a person invested, whose career revolves around entertaining large amounts of people, I want to know why they're entertained.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, particularly a lot of performers, need to actually try to do that, to try to examine, because there are a lot of performers I've noticed. If it's not their kind of thing, someone tries to show them it, but it's not their kind of thing, they will shut down.
Mm-hmm. And that's unfortunate. And I've had this discussion with YouTubers too. Like, I remember, when PewDiePie first started coming to success, talking to people who'd been involved for YouTube for years who were upset by his success. You're like, oh, well, he's only popular because he's a good-looking guy or this or whatever. It's like, if you don't look like him and you're trying to succeed and you're not succeeding, you could just say, oh, he succeeded only because of this. But you should really break it down and understand it. You could say, well, David Copperfield's successful because he looks like he's David Copperfield. Well, what about Ricky Jay? Ricky Jay seems to be pretty successful and doing pretty good, and Ricky Jay found a great way to be Ricky Jay. And that's the thing, is to understand, and sometimes we want an excuse to dismiss something because otherwise it's terrifying to realize we may not have what it takes. I worked on a David Copperfield special when I was a teenager, and up until that point I wanted to be him. That was my ambition. I'm thinking like 500 shows a year, travel around the world, do what he does, that'd be great. Then I saw how hard that guy worked. I saw what went into one of his specials. I saw what went into routining one of his effects and what he did, and I said, I do not want this. I do not have this in me. I am not capable of this amount of dedication and precision when it comes to doing one thing. I'm going to have to choose a different path. And it was never, and I had friends who were like, he got lucky breaks. He got this stuff. It's like, you know what? While you were smoking a bowl of weed, that guy was planning, he was listening to, he was looking up the names of, some of the best writers on Broadway, hiring people to choreograph for a show, spending, instead of going out and blowing his money on the new car, he was blowing his cash, trying to find people who were really, really talented and help him be better.
Something I always said is luck is something that is not just somebody has, it's creative. People find the luck. You look for those positions. They're constantly hustling. The guys who are lucky is because they failed a lot. And they're working hard a lot. They're looking for those opportunities a lot.
Absolutely. I mean, there are, there are people who maybe you get a one-time kind of fluke, but it doesn't help you last. Hollywood is filled with people who got one or two starring roles and then the world forgot about. They had a sitcom and then nobody cared about them. And what's that?
One-hit wonders.
Yeah, because maybe there just wasn't enough. Maybe not that they weren't necessarily talented, but the market for what they had wasn't what they thought. Whereas other people, consistently keep coming up to bat because somebody said there's something there. I'll use Chris Angel as an example. Chris Angel had done like an ABC Family special. He did like a Sci-Fi Channel special. There was a lot of interest in trying to get Chris Angel onto television into some other medium, and then finally it worked. It came through. Penn and Teller. Penn and Teller had been on SNL. Penn and Teller had done tons of Letterman appearances. Penn and Teller did they've had numerous TV specials, but they never became successful from their TV specials. They became successful from their talk show appearances because every talk show booker in the world would look at these guys and go, "Oh my God, we need to have them on here." And we were going to hear about Penn and Teller one way or the other. We could take away some pivotal point in their career, they were still going to end up where they ended up. I'm a big believer in that.
Yeah, some people may have gotten a lucky chance, but the ones who succeeded were the ones who ran with it. We took that opportunity. And then
David Copperfield did his first Magic special when he was 20 years for, it was actually for ABC. It was The Magic of ABC featuring David Copperfield, where he introduced the fall lineup of television shows. And after that, he popped up a year or two later on CBS, and because he had enough of an idea of what he wanted to do, he was going to figure that out. Siegfried and Roy. Siegfried and Roy never had hugely successful television series, but they could take their act to any stage in Las Vegas, and they were going to make it a big success.
On the subject of one-hit wonders, we just mentioned a moment ago. What do you think of a lot of these talent shows that are currently seem to be quite popular and quite trendy at the moment?
I have mixed feelings on them. I think that if you're at a certain level, if you're at a certain point, if you have a show, if you're a working magician and you're trying to find more work and you're trying to get attention to what you're doing, and you're not getting, you have big fans of time without bookings, they might be a good thing to go do. If you're trying to break into magic and you don't really have that show and you don't do that, you're going to be the guy they make fun of. You're going to be the person that's being made the fool in front of everybody else. If you're at a certain level and you're working a lot and you have a lot of steady bookings, going on that show, and unless you have if you block out your time, going on that show can be a problem. It gets expensive. The first 2 or 3 rounds are easy because you can use existing material, but after that, you have to keep coming up with bigger and better stuff. They expect you to top things. It's not like being a musician or a singer where you just have to learn a new song. Not that that's easy, but that's a hell of a lot cheaper than it is to build a new illusion or come up with something else. And
or even develop an illusion.
Yeah, exactly. And the guys that have gone, the furthest, I haven't even followed, but like the guy that most recently, he was able to, take close-up magic and smaller, inexpensive stuff and make that work. But at the end of the day, nobody can name a previous winner of those shows. Average person does not recall them, doesn't even know who won, the singing competitions anymore. They're so ubiquitous. There's so many people coming through them. And, is the guy, the magician who ranked the best last year any more memorable than the guy that ranked the best 4 years ago or 5 years ago? And the answer is no.
I actually heard a story recently, and I was wondering what you thought about it. Some friends of mine actually received an email from one of these talent companies. Now, I won't mention the talent company itself, but it basically sort of said, you should come on our show as like a support act, great exposure. This is coming from a major TV company, and they didn't want to pay him. They were saying you should come on for just exposure.
Yeah, no, the bookers, they will, for the talent, because they record the auditions for those portions of it, yeah, they'll say, come audition for this, whatever, and again, there's not, a lot of times TV, there's no money, too, it's not like, the person, it's not like the person asking them to do that has this big budget they're sitting on top of, but you can do it for, if you do things for the experience, you have to understand the experience may not be positive. And that's, I've been involved I've had 3 Magic pilots. I had 3 pilot, it was finally the 3rd pilot, with A&E, where I actually got something that went to series. And I had other opportunities I did not pursue, I did not do, because I said, you know what, everything's going to be wrong. There is no good outcome here. I may get experience, but I already had enough experience at that point to know what I wanted to do, what I didn't want to do. But again, I've worked in television. I think I get like every time these shows come up, I'll get some email from somebody or whatever. It's like, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. What advice can you give me or whatever? And they don't have an act. They've never really performed for money. They've never made a living by performing. And it's like, what advice can you give me? Like, well, I mean, go perform. I get every other week I get an email from some 15-year-old kid who wants to be, I want to be on TV. I want to have a TV special. I want to do this. What advice? Can you be my consultant? Whatever. It's like, kid, go perform. Go perform. Go out there and have something. And our inability to see ourselves is hard. That's and I went through that phase. I looked in the mirror. I thought I saw young David Copperfield. That wasn't. Nobody else saw that. But that's the problem. Is you have to get to the point and see things as they are and what they could be, but understanding how to get from here to there. And when it comes to these talent things, they seem like, oh man, I go do this and then now I'm famous. But it can help with. It'll help you within the market you're getting into, but I'm not aware of it really doing a lot. It does some things for some people, but I don't. I think if you said, man, I want to spend the next 6 months and $50,000 elevating my act and getting to the next level, I can tell you much better ways than those competitions.
Yeah.
Well, I actually just had that question posed to me by a young kid out of California. I've been helping about 16. He was like, yeah, 2 years, man. Because he just started learning magic. He's like, 2 years, I'm going to go audition for America's Got Talent. Why haven't you auditioned yet? And I'm like, because I probably won't win. If I'm going to go out and do this, I'm going to do this because, I feel that I am worth that $1 million. I feel that I've worked harder than those people on that stage, than the dancers and the singers, even the jugglers at, Horse, the guy who got kicked in the balls. He may have been funny, but he worked really hard on that. He worked really hard. And, as hard as I've worked, I know that I can probably do all right, and that's about it. But you go in and you go in to win, and a lot of these guys just are taking it seriously and giving it the time and respect that it deserves. Stuart Paul, I was talking to a little bit earlier, and he said, because he was one of his mentors was Jeff Sheridan, and he says, Jeff Sheridan always said, if you want to do card manipulation acting, you want to go do that on stage, practice for 15 years. And then go and perform. And that was purely because it deserves time and respect, and to be exquisite, not to be fumbled through, not to be just made a mockery of. It's a respect thing to what you're doing and how you're going to portray yourself. A lot of guys don't even care about that, which is kind of a problem for the community in itself, because you get guys who are going like, oh well, I can do a double lift. Hold on a second, I got this. And doing crap like that, going, oh, well, I'm going to win America's Got Talent.
Well, at the other end of it, look at, like Rudy Kobe, who's done 2 Fox television specials. You look at how they treated him on there. Or Kevin James. Kevin James. I mean, these guys are brilliant. These are some of the most clever performers we've ever seen. They're fantastic performers. They're brilliant guys, and they get on that stage and they treat them the same way as the guy who's blowing into Coke bottles to, sing harmonies. And that's. I look at how people I know are super talented. What's happened in that process, and I'm like, why? It's like, I don't know. I think that there's smarter, more strategic ways. David Copperfield, to my knowledge, never won a magic competition. Siegfried and Roy, Penn and Teller, none of them used an award show as their platform. And there are very few people in any other form or entertainment that, there are a handful of musicians that we can say that came through there, but, I don't think it's that viable.
I think at the end of the day, the only way you'll ever build yourself up is by building up the respect of the people around you.
Yeah, and I'm not a big subscriber in the, hey, you have to practice for X amount of time or this or that, whatever. I think you just have to be good. And you know, Jeff Sheridan's Jeff Sheridan. Yeah,
Well,
I mean,
the point what he was making was that you give it enough time to look effortless, and it was the respect towards what you're doing, because you don't want to come out and look like a schlump in front of people. You know,
absolutely. I get nervous when somebody says, hey, I have this, you know, I want to enter, you know, America's Got Talent, and I want to use one of your illusions, auditions next week or whatever. I'm like, please don't. Please, please, please don't. You know, it's. Do you think the magic fairy is going to come down and bless you with talent you don't already possess? Do you think that all of a sudden that it's weird, you know, and it's you know, you don't want that to happen.
I think a lot of people make the horrible mistake, though, of thinking, I've learnt a trick. I am now a master wizard.
Yeah. I mean, it's that impulse to want to share. I mean, which is why we share with other people, but that's, you know, it's hard to overcome that.
Anyway, guys, that's pretty much all we've got time for, really. I said that's all we've got time for, really. We've run out of time.
No, I got plenty of time. I got more time. I don't know what you're talking about.
No, I mean, the time allocated by Full Circle Magic.
No, I know.
Okay, cool. But make sure that you check out Andrew on social media and such. I'll put some links to your profiles in the description box below the video.
His website.
Thanks to Alex for coming into this call very last minute. And see you guys later. Take it easy, guys.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Talk to you soon, Andrew.